Yeah. No, the podcast is actually doing great. As I said, thank you everybody who was giving.
Oh, we
us,
started already, haven't we?
Yeah, sure, why not? Huge thank you to everybody who gave us, or who sent us in that podcast was like their top podcast of the year, or it's in their top 5 or top 10 or whatever. That was awesome. That was super super cool. Plus, I got some great emails from people about the podcast. So sorry if I haven't gotten back to you yet. If you've emailed in to That Chapter Industries about the podcast and stuff like that. But I got some great ones. I actually got some great listener stories.
Brilliant, excellent.
Yeah, some really really cool ones sent in. So keep sending them in. The email address is mikeohello@gmail.com. If you got a cool, scary story or creepy story or whatever that we should read out in the podcast, listener tales episode, send it in. We'll laugh about it. We'll make fun of you. We'll make fun of your story, and it'll be great. We'll all have a good time.
We'll all give it a go.
Exactly. We can give it a go together. We'll all get some of that goo. So what's going on, Keith? What's new with you? It's been a while since we've done the podcast, actually. We haven't recorded in 2 weeks. I mean, it won't seem like that to the listener.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen each other in 2 weeks, and we were so excited to see each other.
I know, I was like jumping up and I was like...
Yeah, I know. Oh,
Keith
got me a sweet-ass t-shirt of Matthew Hopkins. My boy, free Matty Hopkins.
He's such a bastard.
Hell yeah. He rules. He rules. It's a cool t-shirt. It's a cool-ass t-shirt. I gotta wear it. I'll put it in a picture and wear it. Hell yeah, man.
T-shirts, they're a great present. As I was saying to you, it's like I just pick a t-shirt that I'd wear and then I just give it to you.
That works out because we would wear a lot of the same shit anyway.
Exactly, yeah. And if you don't like it, I'll wear it.
So yeah, what's new with you? Fans are curious. They still are curious. They're always asking about you, Keith this, Keith that. I'd have to start finding you on Instagram and shit like that. We haven't even seen you yet. We still have to do our video episode where we record ourselves. Well, we should do it for the listeners episode.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we'll do it with up in the old spooky attic.
I know.
Yeah,
I really am kind of dreading going to your house now, to be honest with you.
It's just the attic. The rest of the house is lovely.
The rest of the house is where other ghostly shit has happened.
Just a little bit. Not too much.
A little bit. By a little bit, you mean a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's mostly contained to the attic.
Yeah, that's
mostly.
where we got the baseball and the bodies are buried up there. So it wouldn't make sense that the ghost activity is strongest up in the attic.
But apart from that, nothing really else exciting going on. But I'll tell you what I am excited for. The old Christmas party we're going to this week.
Oh, yes, we are. Yeah. What, do you think we should take pictures and do it? We should do a live episode?
Yeah, we could.
That does remind me, actually. Fucking hell, like about almost a year ago on my wedding day, we recorded like 2 minutes for the podcast. We still should put that in.
We should.
I still have it on my phone.
That's it. Yeah, we're going to the same pub.
Oh yeah, it's great. Yeah.
It's a good old pub. It reminded me. So it actually kind of ties into this story that we're doing today a little bit. Mm-hmm. But something that happened last year when we went out. We were drinking out in the pub. Mm-hmm. Now this pub, it's like. I don't know, it's a lovely pub, but it's in the old sticks.
It's in the middle of nowhere.
It's in the middle of nowhere, yeah.
It's a bit of a drive.
It is. But to combat that, the owners of the pub, they put on a courtesy bus to get you home.
Yeah.
And we were outside, and I'd quite a few drinks on me at that time. And I overheard somebody say that it's like, oh, some of the barmen are giving people lifts home.
Yeah, they do that from time to time. Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I just got me. I was like, great. And I just seen the car and I hopped in. And I was like, how's it going? He's like, all right. And he was like, can you drop him back home? And he's like, where do you live? I was like, Ashburn. Great. Yeah. So we were going home. We're having shooting the shit a little bit. And then we were halfway there. And I was like, how long have you worked in the pub? Like, he's like, oh, I don't work in the pub. So I just hopped in a random car and asked him to bring me home.
Take me home. Yeah. He was like, all right.
Yeah, okay, sure, why not? So that was like...
If he was licking his lips or something, might have been an indication. Maybe you shouldn't do that from now on.
Right, yeah. That's what, from this story today, I was kind of like, it can get dangerous. Yeah. So I just threw my fiver and got the hell out of that car.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know you get in random people's cars and then hope that they'll take you home.
Yeah, fingers crossed, you know?
All right. So, will we get into today's episode?
Yeah, let's do it.
That's enough shooting shit. That's killed a good 4 minutes of the podcast episode so far.
Nice.
So we're getting there.
Yeah,
All right, we can get through this. All right, so in this whole episode of the That Chapter podcast, we're talking about the Claremont serial killer. This is taking us to Australia, mate. Going down to Perth. By the river.
That's pretty good. I'm not going to try it.
I don't even know. I'm so bad at accents, but you know what? I'm a trier. You know what? I'll give it the old college try.
The only way you're going to get better is keep trying.
Exactly. Just keep doing it. So, shit. It sounds so good in my head. I can't do it. Claremont is where we are going to today for our story of a very sick serial killer. I hear you're barking, big dog. What the fuck is a Claremont? Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you. Claremont is an affluent suburb of Perth in Western Australia. It's sat on the northern bank of the Swan River, and Claremont is regarded as a very safe place to live and to work. But that's not to say it's perfect by any means. But you know what? You can do worse than Claremont. Oh wait, no shit. I just remember we're talking about a serial killer. Maybe you can't actually do worse than a place where a serial killer was prowling, now that I think about it. So our story today takes us to Claremont's Strip, which is the main drag home to several bars and clubs, and that's where the young and hip, people like us, Keith, the young and hip deuterinos among the population head off to blow off steam after a hard day's work. Now that I don't know about.
Yeah.
First part I do.
Oh, yeah, we are hip. Yeah, definitely hip. It's up to kids say these days. We're still hip. We're with it.
I walk around, I click my fingers and I walk around.
Yeah, we're down with the kids.
Yeah, I'm singing jazz in my head.
It definitely is, like, it's an extremely popular area for young people, as you said. But as we're going to get into it now, one of the residents recalls that things ended up getting so bad in this area that people were afraid to go to Claremont during the day, let alone the night.
Wow. Whoa. And these are Australians.
I know.
Fucking hell, they have giant spiders in their house and they're afraid to go. Unfortunately, someone else was blowing off steam there too. Let's begin in 1996. Sarah Spears was just 18 years old when she vanished after a night out with friends at the Club Bay View Bar in the heart of the Strip in Claremont. These days, the bar goes by the name The Ave. Sarah was raised by her parents Don and Carol in Darkin, a small town in rural Western Australia's wheat belt. Now, usually when I say small town, you're probably thinking a few thousand people. Well, when I say small this time, it's probably better to say microscopic. At the last census, Darkin had a population of 403 people.
That is small.
It is small. It's itty-bitty. It's an itty-bitty town. Despite its diminutive size, Darkin is actually a bit of a social hub for the surrounding area with a golf course, hotel, supermarket, sport and athletic facilities, and of course, one of them good old schools. It's actually a relatively affluent place and a nice, safe community to grow up and grow old in. The school options are limited to primary only, however, so the town's teens are usually shipped out to high schools in the city of Perth. Sarah attended and graduated from the prestigious Iona Presentation College in Mosman Park. Immediately after, Sarah went to secretarial school and quickly found a job working as a receptionist at an engineering consultancy firm. So, in 1996, January of that year, Sarah and her big sister Amanda were sharing an apartment in Perth. And after a Friday night partying in downtown Claremont at the Club Bayview Bar, Sarah said goodnight to her friends and headed off home. Around 2 a.m, she walked to a telephone box. Remember telephone boxes?
I do. We actually still have one around the area. Around the corner from where I live.
You do?
Yeah, it's kind of modernised now. It has like a touchscreen thing, but it's still a telephone
box.
They
have touchscreen telephone boxes? That seems bizarre.
I know, it kind of
doesn't make sense. It'd be like having a touchscreen wind-up phone.
Right.
One of those ones, the rotary phones or whatever.
Yeah. I guess it's for an emergency, but at the same time, in emergency, like you still need to have like $2 in you.
Yeah. See, they didn't think this true. They didn't think it true. Anyway, that's enough of attention.
I hope they're listening. Okay.
Sarah booked a taxi to take her back to the apartment her and her sister shared. Just a few minutes later, the taxi arrived at that telephone box from where she'd called it, but Sarah had vanished into thin air. Reports from several residents nearby said they'd heard a woman screaming coming from where Sarah would have been picked up, which is pretty bone-chilling, my dude.
Mm.
Now, the theory about what actually happened to Sarah is that she'd gotten into a car mistakenly, like thinking it was a taxi, and, well...
The night that Sarah went missing, it was on a national holiday, Australia Day. So
Aussie Day, mate.
Aussie Day. So it definitely would have been busier than normal.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess with the hustle and bustle of things, it's very likely that she got in the wrong car quite easily. It's interesting that you mentioned that several residents of Mosman Park heard screams from a woman. So one resident said that at 3 a.m. she heard a blood-curdling scream from a woman, and then she woke up. She woke up her fiance, who was lying next to her, who went over to the window, looking out in the direction of where she heard the scream from. He then heard a scream and 2 car doors slamming around 5 seconds apart, and then heard a car just speed off, screech off into the distance. Yep, good sound effects. I'm positive that the person who did take Sarah went out that night with sinister motives, but I'm not actually sure they set out with the intention to kill someone. 'Cause it doesn't really make any sense why they pretend to be a taxi, pick up a young girl, actually then drive her to her destination. and then started attacking her by trying to get her back to the car and then drive off somewhere else. So I wonder if his initial plan was to pretend to be a taxi, pick up a drunk girl, take her back to her house, maybe try to force his way in, but then things kind of got out of hand, so you have to try and get back in the car and drive off. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, as we will see from this culprit, he might not have been trying to kill her at all. It might have just happened, and then he was like, well, I guess I'm a serial killer now. And then he kind of went from there. So that's exactly it. Whoever picked up Sarah that night probably posed as a taxi driver to convince any lone young woman he could to get into the car with him. And to this day, so this happened in 1996, it's what? I'm not very good at math. So 17 years later. Oh, is that 17 years?
Let me get the old calculator.
Yeah. Minus the 2. Yes, anyway. It's a good few years later. No, is it? No, it's fucking 27 years later. I am bad at maths. I got a D in maths, folks. Yeah, anyway, even these many years later, 27 years later, Sarah's never been found. Her body has never been found. Nobody really knows what happened to her. We can guess. And from where the story goes, we can presume who was behind it, but we don't know. So at the time, what happened to Sarah was considered to be a horrible, tragic, terrifying event, but isolated. That's what they hoped. That is, until about 4.5 months after Sarah's disappearance, when 23-year-old childcare assistant Jane Rimmer disappeared in scarily similar circumstances to Sarah. Jane's sister described Jane as being a tough and feisty girl from the day she was born. She was raised in Perth, attended Rosalie Primary School and then Hollywood High School. Jane had always been very close to her family and wouldn't go long without contacting them in one way or another. So, when she hadn't been in touch, they knew something just wasn't right. She had last been seen in the same area of Claremont Sarah had been in and vanished after a night out on the town. In the wake of Sarah Spears' disappearance, police jumped on Jane's case and began by reviewing CCTV footage from outside the Continental Hotel in Claremont. That is where Jane had last been seen by her friends. That's when they saw a video of Jane and an unknown male seemingly following her. And seeing that, they didn't have a good feeling and knew they had to escalate the search. In the days and weeks after her disappearance, Jane's family put up posters and looked non-stop for any sign of her. But, tragically, 55 days after she disappeared on the 3rd of August 1996, Jane's parents got the news that no parent should ever have to hear. Jane's body had been found in bushland, 40 kilometres, or 25 miles, south of the city.
Jane's body was discovered by absolute chance by a family who were driving along this rural road when a rooster ran out in front of them. So they stopped the car and got out to chase the bird. And then while out of the car, the mother began picking flowers from the side of the road. So she walked partly down a bush path before she made the discovery of a body concealed only a few metres from the road. This family must have been riddled with ADHD. How the hell did they ever get anywhere? They're just
driving and then gotta get chicken. Flowers. Dead body. It's like everything coming at them at once. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a good thing they were. At least they were able to give the family closure. Now, police thought from the very beginning that Jane may have met with the same fate as Sarah had. Claremont is usually such a safe place to live in and relax in that, the idea of two unconnected disappearances happening so close together seemed very unlikely. Someone was hunting young women in the area and was almost certainly going to strike again and very soon, if they hadn't already. The disappearances of Jane and Sarah were just too close to be coincidence. Major crimes took up the investigation after Sarah went missing, but when the circumstances of Jane's disappearance were established, a specialized task force called Macro was set up and was given the sole mission of finding the girls and determining exactly what had happened to them. And as news of another young woman going missing in Claremont during the night out reached the task force, they instantly knew they were dealing with a serial killer. Their worst case scenario was now a reality. Aspiring lawyer, 27-year-old Ciara Glennon, had been celebrating St. Patrick's. Oh, jeez, St. Patrick's Day with her friends at the...
Oh, jeez. Top of the morning.
Oh, jeez, St. Patrick's Day, sure don't you know? Oh, Jesus. She'd been celebrating St. Patrick's Day with her friends at the popular Continental Hotel. Once again, this is the same area Sarah and Jane had vanished from. She'd left around midnight after telling friends she was calling it a night and she'd be heading straight home. Ciara had only just returned to Perth 2 weeks earlier and was looking forward to returning to work after a little more than a year away, which she spent indulging her love of travel. Kira was also excited to be helping her sister with preparations for her sister's upcoming nuptials. Kira had been appointed head bridesmaid. Along with several other workmates from the law firm, Blake, Dawson, and Waldron, Kira had a few sups in the boardroom for St. Patrick's Day before their boss drove them all to the Continental. And yes, the very same hotel that Jane Rimmer had last been seen drinking at and had been caught on CCTV. In fact, in a really fucked up coincidence, the same person who owned the Continental Hotel at the time also owned the Club Bayview, the bar Sarah Spears had last been seen at. So, Kira's parents had been concerned that she hadn't returned home by the time they went to bed that night. They later contacted her friends and realised she was missing. The Western Australian government offered a reward of $250,000 after Kira's disappearance and confirmed to the public that they were looking for a single perpetrator in the cases of all 3 women, despite not having a body in Sarah's case, not even to this day. 19 days after Kira vanished on the 3rd of April, a bushwalker out 40 kilometres, 25 miles north of Perth, found Kira's semi-nude body partially hidden near an isolated walking trail. Again, as you spoke, very similar to Jane's.
Yeah.
How her body was found.
Yeah. It's interesting. It was a finger again.
Keith does love the finger point.
It's interesting how a lot of serial killers, they tend to target the same geographic areas like again and again. Like the Club Bayview bar, where you said Sarah Spears went missing, and the Continental Hotel, now the Claremont Hotel, where Jane Rimmer and Kira Glennon were last seen. They're literally a 2-minute walk from each other. They're really, really close. So like, you'd think the killer would be like, okay, maybe I'll go somewhere else in case I don't want to raise suspicion. But yeah, most serial killers, they have these comfort zones or hunting grounds, and it's generally like an area they are personally familiar with because it's often defined by like an anchor point or so where they live or where they work. And the majority of serial killers, they'll stick to these well-known hunting grounds throughout their killing careers. However, over time, there is certain serial killers, they do expand their actions beyond familiar territories, but typically only after gaining confidence through like successful execution of multiple murders, while also managing to stay off police radar. In this case, it definitely seems like the killer was definitely managing to avoid detection anyway from the police.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there were several similarities in the way the 2 bodies had been disposed of. Jane Rimmer's body was found in an area roughly 40 kilometres south of Perth, Kira Glennon's 40 kilometres north of Perth. Like Jane's body, Kira's had also not been buried, but there was an obvious attempt to hide the body with branches and foliage from the surrounding bush. Both women had severe neck injuries, later determined to have been caused by a sharp force instrument. Essentially, they were both stabbed to death in the neck. All 3 women had last been seen using taxis, calling taxis, or about to get in a taxi, so you might want to have a look at taxi drivers, lads. After a huge dragnet-style operation, during which the thousands of licensed taxi drivers in Western Australia were fingerprinted and many were DNA tested, at the end of the day, that didn't seem like they were getting much closer. At the same time, the government took the opportunity to tighten the licensing conditions for operating a taxi in the area.
After they changed the licensing conditions, a number of people who had criminal records ended up losing their license. So possibly preventing further assaults, or they just took someone's job who was just trying to turn their life around.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, I mean, as you talked about, it was likely somebody posing as a taxi driver, not an actual taxi driver.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So you're just like, you're tightening you tightening the licensing. I mean, I guess on one hand it's good, but on the other hand, yeah, you're probably costing people's jobs, and this isn't going to help you. Solve the case. It's not a real taxi.
Yeah. The mayor of Claremont at the time, Peter Wagers, he actually publicly objected to mass screening and DNA collection from these taxi drivers, saying that it was an abuse of civil liberties. Like as you can imagine, this was received with a lot of criticism from people, including Kira Glenn's father, who obviously just wanted the killer to be found. And this position that he took, it cost him the election the next year.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'd agree with it to some extent. I do believe it is, if it's a horrible killer, you should be able to use it. But it's also like, it's definitely, it's like Big Brother-esque type shit as well, I feel. I don't know. It's. I mean, I can see both sides of it.
Yeah, like I definitely see, I was saying, like, it's abuse of civil liberties. But then also, I don't know, if it was my daughter,
that's exactly.
I'd want to get found. I wouldn't care.
Yeah, that's true. If it was my family member, I wouldn't give a shit. Plus, I mean, if there was, like, say, a horrible murder in this town, I would willingly give my DNA just if it could help in any way. Yeah. Unless I did it. Maybe the mayor did it. Maybe he was zero.
Yeah. Well, actually, we might get to that bit later.
Oh, spoiler alert. In the midst of the investigation by the Macro Task Force, officers arrested a 41-year-old public servant from Cotslow, the next neighbourhood over from Claremont, named Lance Williams, as he drove around Claremont in circles at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning, right as many young women were making their way home after a night out of the town. Williams was considered a prime suspect in the earlier stages of the investigation and was named publicly as a person of interest in 1998. Williams was certainly doing everything he possibly could to make himself appear guilty, whether he was or not. He was driving around Claremont with seemingly no reason to be there and had shown what police described as inappropriate sexual behavior. It was also highly likely that investigators were a little bit more than desperate to put a name to the monster who had been terrorizing the Claremont streets for over a year, with 3 women dead at their hands. Now, for his part, Williams claimed that he wasn't being predatory at all. Oh, Jesus, not into that kind of thing at all. And he'd only been driving it there to protect women from the killer, which is a great excuse. I'm acting like a killer to protect. Hey, listen, it takes a killer to catch a killer. You know, it takes a predator to catch a predator, if you ask me.
I was just there to find out how to get away from there.
Exactly, yeah. He'd been driving around warning people. He was like, hey, chicks, get in the back of my taxi alone. And I'll lock the doors so the killer can't get in it. How much truth there is to his claims is probably something we'll really never know. But for sure, the police zeroed in on him as a suspect, and perhaps even to the detriment of the case. It's something that happens time and time again when the police are so desperate to catch someone for a crime that they jump on the first slightly odd or strange person they come across. Williams was only officially ruled to no longer be a person of interest in 2008, after the DNA sample was obtained and tested.
Yeah, I don't know how much I believe, like as we're saying, that he was out driving just to protect women from the killer. Mm-hmm. Like, it's such a weird thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, I get trying to help, but, like, you're not Batman.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But if his intentions were, in fact, genuine, I do feel sorry for the guy.
Mm-hmm.
When the police arrested him, detectives spent more than 12 hours interrogating him without having a lawyer present. And in the end, though, they didn't have enough to charge him, so they had to let him go. But police then increased their surveillance of him, making it like a continuous around-the-clock effort, both at his residence and at his workplace. Mm-hmm. His parents' home was searched as well, and parts of the backyard were dug up, and both his car and his parents' cars were forensically tested. Then, when the media got wind of all this, he was hounded by reporters, as well as his family. Then, when it emerged Mr. Williams had failed a polygraph, the media went to a frenzy.
Insane, yeah.
Even though, like, a polygraph test, like, it couldn't be used as evidence because it's so unreliable.
Yeah.
But when it was described on the TV that he was the prime suspect in the Claremont case, it was something that stuck with him and in the minds of the public until the end of his life, which is shit.
It is, but I mean, he put himself there.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. If it's, I don't know what he was thinking. If his intentions were absolutely genuine, he was there. I don't know. It still seems weird what he was doing.
I mean, if your intentions, so if you weren't like a predator and you did think you were actually helping these people, then you're just a fucking idiot.
Yeah, like, I think he was a bit soft. You know?
Yeah, he sounds like he might have been just a little bit.
I said earlier on about the mayor, and we're going to bring it up again as one of the suspects. He actually was. It was like he defended that guy who was going around,
because for dragging it.
Yeah. So he defended taxi drivers, but he also defended the guy that was driving around and got brought to the police.
Yeah.
So he was pulled in as one of the suspects, and his house got raided and all that stuff.
So, at one point in the investigation, things had gotten so desperate for progress of any kind that officers from one of 10 active macro teams actually consulted with David Burney, who, together with his wife, Catherine, had been responsible for killing 4 women at their Perth home in 1986, what would become known across Australia as the Morehouse murders. So essentially, the macro team that was looking into the Claremont serial killer was asking serial killers for tips. And years would pass without any more significant news in what had now become known as the Claremont serial killings. Then, in 2004, 8 years after the disappearance of Sarah Spears in January 1996, the documentary TV show Australian Story ran an episode that focused on the investigation into the Claremont killings, and even brought in outside experts from across Australia and even from the UK. After the show aired, Task Force Macro went through kind of an overhaul and completely reassessed their approach to the case, which included taking on board a lot of the suggestions of the experts who appeared in the episode of that TV show. The original forensic teams had done a very thorough job of collecting and storing samples of everything, from fingernail and skin scrapings to microscopic fibers. In a psychological profile drawn up at the time of the murders, the author noted that the murders were highly unlikely to be the first offences committed by the killer, and that there was a high chance that the offender would have escalated from the much smaller offences until eventually crossing the line into full-blown murder. So they were getting DNA, but it didn't seem like they were getting any closer to actually catching this guy. And in the end, the macro team dissolved, and it was replaced by the Special Crime Squad. They were now responsible for solving the murders. In 2008, 2 sergeants from the Special Crime Squad set out to re-examine every single bit of the forensic evidence gathered from the original crime scenes, which was no small task at all. They soon found that despite there being nearly 4,000 various pieces of evidence submitted, a large portion of them hadn't actually been tested. One piece in particular jumped out as being so overlooked, yet so unbelievably vital, that they were at first confused and thought the tests must have been done, just misplaced. They actually had a scraping from the left thumbnail of Ciara Glennon, and that scraping had never been tested. This is literally DNA on her hands of maybe fighting the person who had done this to her, and they never... It's bizarre how... Yeah. Even if they were tested in 1996, it's not for sure they actually would have found anything. After all, DNA come a long way in the intervening years. So much so that nowadays, forensic analysts don't even require the DNA of the perpetrator themselves. They can make links with even only familial DNA.
Yeah, there's a lot of those cold cases now being solved through the genetic
It's amazing. It's incredible technology. I think it's so
Isn't
fucking
it?
cool
It's
that they're able to do that.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Like that Golden State Killer, he was caught.
Yeah, because like one of his cousins or whatever did fucking My Heritage or one of those DNA family.
Just trying to find out,
things.
like, am I Irish? You
Yeah,
exactly.
what percentage of whatever am I? Yeah. And it's like, you just call it horrible serial killer. It's like, oh shit, didn't even know he's related to him. It's crazy. In 2008, things hadn't come as far as today, but there was still more than enough advancement and resources that analysts were able to determine 2 complete samples were present under Ciara's fingernails. Unsurprisingly, one of those was of Ciara herself, no shit. The other belonged to an unknown male. Also, no shit. Investigators had their first break, though, in more than a decade, as they finally had the actual killer's DNA, and it had been sitting right there under their nose for how many years? Though they didn't have a name yet, investigators were able to make a different link. It turned out that the sample did match another sample they had from a completely separate unsolved crime, an unsolved rape from 1995. See, in 1995, a year before the first victim, Sarah Spear, disappeared, a young girl was on her way home and she'd been dragged into a car and driven to a cemetery where the assailant assaulted her multiple times. She'd been bound and gagged in the car on the way to this cemetery, and this was exactly the kind of crime that the police profiler had meant when they referred to a chain of escalation. That the murders wasn't his first crime, that he'd been climbing up the ranks. Though that was also still unlikely to be the first offense, it certainly seemed to be a step in the wrong direction. Frustratingly, despite the injection of hope caused by the discovery of the link between the murders and an earlier assault, once more the trail cooled down. They knew the killer had killed 3 women, most likely, and then assaulted another woman earlier, but they still didn't know who he was. It wasn't until a campaign ran across a series of newspapers that the Claremont murders were brought right back into the public consciousness, and some development began again. The newspaper articles, this was the first time the link between the assault and Ciara Glennon's murder had been published. This led to a huge influx of resources for the Special Crime Squad, and eventually resulted in the connection being made, with all the tips that were coming in, with this being public information. And so, on December 22nd, 2016, 20 years after Sarah Spears disappeared, Bradley Robert Edwards was arrested at his Kewdale home, and after a 12-plus hour interrogation, he was charged a day later under suspicion of murder in the cases of both Jane and Ciara. Bradley Robert Edwards was born in Meriden in Western Australia on December 7th, 1968. Now, there's very little information, very little is known about his early years growing up in rural Oz. What we do know is that he grew up in Huntingdale with his parents, a younger brother, and an older sister. Bradley's father worked for Telstra, and he soon followed in his father's footsteps, taking up an apprenticeship with the telecoms company. Despite marrying young, Edwards would often sneak out late at night and peep through windows, steal underwear from washing lines, and masturbate in public places. Sounds like classic Keith to me.
All very normal stuff so
Very
far.
nice. Yeah, man after my own heart.
Not seeing any red flags at all. Yeah.
In 1990, aged 21, however, Edwards launched an unprovoked attack on a social worker named Wendy Davis. This is a real fucking weird story, by the way.
Yeah.
See, the then 40-year-old Wendy had been sitting at a desk in Hollywood Hospital, right? She was writing a report when Edwards, who'd been there working for Telstra as an apprentice at a hospital, fixing up their telecommunications, whatever, he approached her from behind and attempted to force a cloth into her mouth and tried to drag her to a toilet. Now, God only knows what would have happened to her had she not been able to fight Edwards off and run for help. After she broke away, Edwards continued to move towards her and repeatedly said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to try and do some horrible shit to you." Security came, restrained him, and held him until police arrived. Now, not only did Bradley Edwards not go to prison for the assault, he actually received 2 years probation for common assault. He didn't even lose his job.
Jeez.
A rep for Telstra described the incident as out of character for Edwards.
I'd say so.
Yeah, and you'd hope so. And put the attack down to his relationship struggles, which is, the old have an argument with your partner and try and drag a woman into a bathroom. That old classic. Edwards was even promoted soon after. Later, it was revealed in court that Edwards and his then-wife invited a friend to move in with them to help out with rent and bills. But shortly after, his wife began having an affair with this guy. Not longer after he discovered his wife was having an affair, Sarah Spears went missing. Searching his home shortly after his arrest, the police found a trove of extreme pornography, bizarre homemade sex toys, women's underwear, including some with holes cut in them, as well as notebooks with detailed scenarios about abducting, raping, and murdering women. At the time of his arrest, 51-year-old Bradley Edwards was remarried, though separated at the time of his arrest, and had become a stepfather, even volunteering at his stepdaughter's little athletics club, despite being a sex offender.
Jesus, that's crazy.
Yeah.
With regards to the underwear that you mentioned, so there's a very sick detail about the case,
Okay.
which I'm going to share right now.
I do want to hear these sick details. Hit me.
So 3.5 years after Edwards killed Ciara Glennon, he visited the cemetery where she was buried, and he left a little memento on her grave. So he left behind Ciara's underwear,
Jesus.
which was later discovered by one of her family members.
Oh.
So he killed her, he took her underwear as a trophy, kept it for 3 years, and then dropped it off the grave for her grieving family to find.
That's
fucked up.
very, very, yeah. That's rank.
Yeah, putting it mildly. But after this, the police, they did set up a sting operation around the graveyard in the hopes to catch him, but once again, he just slipped through the cracks.
Goddamn. So, before he went on trial, the prosecution took the unusual step of applying to have the trial heard in front of a judge only, and not by a jury, as would usually happen. Due to the huge amount of publicity surrounding the murders and Edwards' arrest, as well as the graphic nature of much of the evidence, this request was granted, and Edwards' trial began without a jury on the 25th of November 2019 before Supreme Court Justice Stephen Hall.
You ever been called for jury duty?
Yes, I actually have been called for jury duty, and I got out of it because I don't fucking want to go. Yeah,
Nice.
I did. I think I was in college or something at the time,
Right, yeah,
and you
yeah.
can use college as an excuse.
Oh, okay.
What about you?
I was called, and I really wanted to be part of the case.
Yeah.
But I wasn't selected to be one of the jurors.
Do you
Unfortunately,
know what was the case?
it was something it was like a money dispute, but the guy had gone after him with a shotgun. It was like it was like a farmer thing. I was like, I want to be in on this.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. But,
a good one.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I wasn't called. So I had to, yeah.
What red flags did you have?
Well, I didn't even get to that stage. Yeah, I was just brought out, and I had to kind of stand around for the day, and then they were going through the jury selection, and I didn't even make it to the part. They'd already selected our jury before I even got a turn to go up. So
Man, so how long did that take? Was it like a whole day?
it was a whole day.
That sounds boring as shit.
Yeah, it was awful.
That sounds awful. Yeah, no, I'm good. I don't want to do that. The trial showed both what an excellent job the personnel from the macro teams had done in terms of collecting evidence and witness statements, but also showed several areas in which they had been found lacking. As we discussed already, the fact that they hadn't tested the evidence that was on Ciara's hands. A key point for the prosecution was linking each of the kidnappings and murders to the emotionally turbulent times in Bradley Edwards' life. He would lash out when things weren't going well.
So for the first murder of Sarah Spears, the prosecution explained that the emotional upset which sparked Edwards to lash out was when his ex-wife declined his invitation to go see the fireworks display for Australia Day.
Fucking bitch!
Right? Yeah, of all things.
Yeah.
So Edwards' ex-wife, she explained how he had become distant after he bought a new computer and that she eventually began an affair that would lead to their separation. I'm guessing Edwards discovered the wild world of pornography on the dark web. But his ex-wife moved in with her parents to work things out. And Edwards, on Australia Day, the day that Sarah Spears went missing, just showed up unannounced for dinner, asking her to go see some fireworks, which she refused. And it seems that this rejection is what led him to murder Sarah Spears. So he was just completely unhinged.
Yeah. The real nail in Edwards' coffin, as far as evidence goes, was Edwards' work vehicle for Telstra Telecoms. Not only had the same kind of vehicle been spotted driving around Claremont on the same night Jane went missing, but it had also been reportedly parked outside the cemetery where he attacked another young woman on multiple occasions, including at the time of the aforementioned 1995 attack, and also on the evening Sarah Spears was taken. With the DNA evidence from the 17-year-old assault victim, which is the one in the cemetery, that was matching the sample taken from Jane's fingernails, well, any evidence that meant it in one case automatically piled into the other. 3 witnesses who had been to the Continental Hotel the same night as Kira had been taken and killed all testified that they'd seen a woman matching Kira's description leaning into a car and apparently hitchhiking. One of the men claims to have told her she was stupid for hitchhiking and says she responded by flipping him the bird. All of the men said they'd seen a car matching Edwards' work Telstra vehicle van cruise past them shortly after Kira walked past them, and several other witnesses claimed to have seen something similar, seeing a van circling the Claremont area that night. Witness testimonies alone were pretty solid, but the prosecution had a whole heap of physical evidence to support it. See, Edwards' work vehicle had been impounded when he was first arrested. Samples were taken, and they quickly matched the fibres gathered from the bodies of Jane and Kira. Edwards admitted to several other non-murder crimes, including the rape in the cemetery and the breaking into the home of an 18-year-old girl he knew in 1988 and assaulting her in a similar fashion. So tying him to all of the assaults and murders was pretty fairly done. With the DNA from Jane's fingernails, there was no doubt as to Edwards' guilt. It was on her fingernails, it was on Kira's hand, it was everywhere, and he admitted to other attacks. The only really unfortunate part, as far as justice goes, is the lack of a body in the Sarah Spears case. With just how reckless Edwards was with DNA in the other cases, it would be an absolute miracle for Sarah's body to have no DNA or evidence at all, but her body has never been found. There's absolutely no body in the Sarah Spears case, and Edwards has always been unwilling to help the police find one. So, even though he would be ultimately found guilty of both Jane's murder and Kira's, they never charged him with Sarah's. His trial finally came to a conclusion on June 25th, 2020, after more than 7 months of evidence and witness testimonies being heard. Supreme Justice Hall returned his verdict in a 619-page document on December 23rd, 2020. Hall found Edwards guilty and sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 40 whole years, the longest non-parole period handed out at that point. Hall pointed out that Edwards will likely die in prison, to which I say, g'day, mate. That means good.
Absolutely, yeah. It was good actually, because during the trial, 2 survivors, they actually got the opportunity to tell the court their ordeals after 2 decades.
Yeah.
So the woman who was raped by Edwards in the cemetery and the woman who Edwards attempted to rape in her home, they both gave really amazing victim impact statements ahead of the sentencing. One of the women also used Edwards' own words against him, which was fantastic. It was a really good part of the trial. So on Edwards' computer, you mentioned earlier, they found a rape fantasy story that he had edited and possibly written. So the story in that, it closely mirrored the experience that the teenager had in the cemetery. In the opening lines of the story he wrote, they say that you will always remember your first. In my case, I consider my first is Chloe. The woman that he was talking about was now in her mid-40s, staring at Edwards across the courtroom, giving her victim statement. And she said, they say you will always remember your first. Well, in my case, Edwards, I consider my first victory is you. You made me strong. She also said the following, which I'm sure is something that most of us are also hoping. As one of the victims of your crime, I hope you get treated as well in prison as you've treated us.
Nice.
Which I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
good for you.
Yeah, good. I hope he does. I completely agree with that. And Sinead, so that's the story of the Claremont serial killer and Bradley Edwards. Fucking Bradley Edwards. Real sack of shit.
Big time, yep.
But he ain't going anywhere now. So there you go. Yep.
Sinead.
Hey, Sinead. Yeah, so there you go. What do you think of that one?
But yeah, don't be like me who jumps in random cars. Apparently, very clearly, very dangerous.
No, that was a good little lesson there.
Yep, that's it. I won't be doing this year.
No, please don't do it this year. But yeah, that's the story of Bradley Edwards, the Claremont serial killer, another Aussie sumbitch. There you go. Thank you so much for listening. It means a lot to me and Keith. I hope you enjoyed this whole episode. Yeah, as always, here, new episode of the podcast out every Monday morning, every Monday mañana. That means morning, right?
Yeah.
See.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And please check out the That Chapter videos here that are posted on YouTube every Tuesday and Friday. But until the next one,
I'll see you.
there you go. He said it. He said the thing. All right. Thanks, guys. Sarah goes,
Leave that.
yeah. That's for all the ladies listening.